isn't quite yet, but we're pleased to be able to be section or unit 6 with you today. My name is Murray Snow. I am the Chief Judge of the Federal Court in Arizona.
Good morning, afternoon. My name is Tammy Waller, and I am the Director for K-12 Social Studies and World and Native Languages at the Arizona Department of Education. I'm excited to listen to your testimony.
My name's Lynn Simons, and I'm District Court Judge in Washoe County, Nevada. And I'm excited to hear from you, and I'm going to ask all of you to take a very deep breath right now.
All right, you've got your breath in. This is Unit 6. What challenges might face American constitutional democracy in the 21st century? And your question is, Thomas Hobbes noted that life in a state of nature is, quote, solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. How has the human condition changed over time? And how is that change reflected in our expectations of government? Should the principles of natural rights or classical republicanism guide policy changes designed to improve the condition of all people? What are the most pressing domestic and global challenges facing Americans today and in the future? What policies can you suggest to address them? You may begin.
To start, we must break down what Thomas Hobbes meant by solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Hobbes was a giant in philosophy and the author of Leviathan, the book this quote in question is derived from. In chapter 13, he argues that man in its natural state is constantly warring with one another, and that humans can only be saved through a central government. The role of the government is to give man a consciousness, and therefore, without a central government, mankind would eventually revert and expose its pre-political self, which is basic, chaotic, and savage. Man in its natural state had no sense of right or wrong. Good was all that you wanted, and bad was the people and things that stood in your way. Hobbes claimed that mankind chose to leave its state of nature, its ultimate freedom, and submit to an absolute government to pursue peace.
The opinionated view on the progression, regression, and possible stagnation of the human condition is a spectrum. It is also defined by what an individual believes the natural state of man to be, as it is impossible for anyone alive to truly experience the pre-political life of man. Some, like Byron and I, argue that the human condition has worsened. Submitting to a government backfired because a group of humans introduced privileges, biases, and discrimination into the government and society, subjecting those not in authoritative roles in the hierarchy to a solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short life. These changes are reflected in our government by the policies we expected to create and pass. For example, the American Disabilities Act passed in 1990, which prohibits discrimination against disabled persons. A current expectation of the government would be to address and cure our nation of COVID-19.
I, however, argue that the human condition has improved, certainly not to a utopian extent, but has improved. Focusing on our own country, the United States, it is obvious that the human condition is none of these things. For example, it is not solitary, as the First Amendment guarantees our expressive freedoms. Citizens have the freedom of assembly,
We believe that the human condition should be guided to improvement through a balance of classical republicanism and natural rights, and the civic virtue is of the essence to keep American society constantly progressing. An example of a progressing domestic issue that can be addressed through policy changes through classical republicanism is homelessness. According to the annual homelessness assessment report from 2020, point-in-time estimates of people experiencing homelessness in the United States was about 580,500. An almost 13,000 increase from the previous year. According to the statewide point-in-time count of 2015, our state, Hawaii, was estimated to have over 7,600 homeless individuals. Since then, our governor, David Ige, enacted several proclamations to address the chronic homeless issue.
After the initial proclamation, 6 supplemental proclamations were published that declared emergency powers were necessary to further assist the homeless. Fast forward, and according to the statewide point-in-time count of 2020, the estimated number of homeless individuals in the state of Hawaii has lowered by nearly 1,500. A policy change we would suggest is increasing tax on the wealthy and using the funds collected to help establish homeless people into stable homes. In 1953, during Eisenhower's presidency, corporate tax rates reach an all-time high of 92% on those making over $400,000, which would be equivalent to roughly $3,440,000 today. Eisenhower explained that if the super rich wanted to avoid this tax rate, they should invest their money in things that would make America stronger, such as homelessness, business expansions, and higher employee wages.
A pressing global issue we would like to address is pollution, specifically air pollution. According to the World Health Organization, 7 million people die from air pollution every year. A policy we would suggest to reduce the amount of air pollution. Shall we finish? Sorry. 7 million people die from air pollution every year. A policy we would suggest to reduce the amount of air pollution is setting strict restrictions and regulations on how much air pollutants are put into the air. A potential drawback of this policy may be that it can be difficult to enforce. And this concludes our presentation.
Thank you very much. To what extent can or should the United States facilitate and even subsidize the administration of COVID vaccinations worldwide without creating the perception that it is not serving America's interest first?
I'm so sorry. Can you repeat that? I started lagging on my end.
Surely, I'm sorry. To what extent can or should the United States facilitate and even subsidize the administration of COVID vaccinations worldwide without creating the perception that it is not serving American interests first?
Well, first of all, I would like to note that you're saying worldwide. I feel that our nation should be administering the vaccine to everyone in our nation, in our country, should be the first priority that is completed and established by our government. Afterwards, to establish something worldwide, I feel that that would be an issue to administer vaccination to everyone around the globe, just because we don't have presidents.
Okay. So my question has to do with the tension between the natural rights philosophy and classical republicanism and policy change. So how do you propose that we deal with the tension between these two philosophies when solving both global and national issues?
When it comes to these issues and it's breaking down to a solution of a natural rights view or a classical republicanism kind of view on solving it, both are technically necessary because they both bounce off of each other in a certain way in order to solve issues. One side can't favor more than the other, because if one side was more focused on and more emphasized on, then the Americans would, or the citizens themselves wouldn't have their own individual rights, and then the government would be able to be too controlling over them.
To expand on what Erwin is saying, he's emphasizing that a balance is very necessary because it's all about checks and balances. So classical republicanism proposes that the government will do everything in the people's best interest, like a parental figure of sorts, to make sure that the people are protected. But if you only go by classical republicanism, then how are the people supposed to establish when their rights have been infringed on? So that's where natural rights philosophy comes into view and gives the people their right to advocate and know what their rights are. So that way the people are able to bring it up to the government when they feel that their rights have been infringed on.
You mentioned in your testimony as a global challenge, air pollution, and you did mention the World Health Organization, which leads me to my question, which is, to which international organizations, if any, should the United States belong?
Since there are rising issues that are happening as of today, and there are different organizations that would try and help and resolve those problems, it would be difficult for the government to prioritize which one would be important and which one it should be relied on. Since there's a variety of types of organizations, the government can't just fund one specific one and solve that problem while the others are suffering. So it'd be hard to try and focus on one and let the others like go on their own way.
Should the United States encourage or discourage trade with countries that are guilty of human rights violations? And please explain your response.
I'm sorry, can you repeat what the United States, what to countries? That's where I cut out.
Should it encourage or discourage trade with countries that are guilty of human rights violations? Please explain your response.
I feel that we have a moral obligation to take a stance and view to what extent these foreign countries or outside organizations are infringing on people's rights. I feel that if there was a way we could not encourage the trade, but encourage the foreign country or organization to consider their rights, their people's rights more, and take a more protective stance instead of the abusing stance. On the stance of trade, regarding trade, sorry, I believe that if we could stray away from the trade with that country, then we should, because we don't want to be seen as a power. We don't want to be seen by our nation's people as somebody that enables another country to do such things. But if it's out of necessity, and only if it's out of necessity, should we continue the trade. But again, we should really encourage that country to be more considerate of the needs and rights.
Okay. So my question has to do with polarization. So your statement talks about a lot of some policy changes, and how can we bring people together in our polarized society to fix these problems? What are some suggestions that you have for that?
A good way to start in order to raise awareness is pretty much spreading information to everyone, making sure that everyone is aware of these crises and these issues that are happening, and have it relate to how it involves them, how they can be negatively affected by them. So that would be a good first start in trying to get everyone together.
Sorry, I'm having issues with my mic, but I'd like to establish that I agree with Erwin. I feel that the more we inform our people, the more knowledge that they hold, and the more educated of a stance they could take on issues. The more we inform people of the struggles that people in less favorable positions hold, maybe the people in better positions are able to broaden their stance and be, again, this comes back to civic virtue that we talk about, where people will do things for the greater good. You see someone struggling, hopefully with the information that they obtain, they would be more likely to help out people in disadvantaged positions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Enjoyed that a lot. Again, my colleagues have said before how it's interesting to see how every group takes this question. I don't think we've ever before encountered the group that advocates that we would be better off without government at all. And that, so reference to Hobbes is completely without evidence. That was sort of intriguing. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed your incorporation of at least a success in Hawaii in terms of addressing some of the policy issues that you're concerned about and how you might go about pursuing that on a broader scale. If I were to offer one constructive criticism that I think you should take to heart, Byron, I want to hear more from you. Erwin, I want to hear a little bit more from you. You both have good things to say when you say it. So let's hear more from you. That would be my suggestion. But I enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
I'm sorry. Thank you. It was a really great round. I really liked how you really laid out your argument, and an interesting argument, kind of going back and forth a little bit in your opening statement. You were really easy to follow, and you had a nice even pace, which gave us enough time to like really think about what you're saying and be able to reflect on it. And you had some really great examples. My one thing that I tell you as you move forward is to think about examples that you can use in the follow-ups. So I felt like you had more to give us in the follow-ups, but maybe we're holding back a little bit. Don't hold back. Think about the question, make your statement, and then try and come up with an example which really shows it. Like that, the idea of, bringing people, the idea of the polarization, and then making people aware of it. Well, tell us what would be a way we might be able to make people aware of it. So, but I think you guys did a great job, and I really enjoyed your presentation and your testimony.
I agree with my colleagues. I did like in the beginning how you really broke down what Hobbes meant and you dug in there a little deeper. And then I also thought you were very clever about how you used a series of groups of three adjectives, 3 adverbs, or 3 nouns, because I kept finding myself waiting for the next one. So it really drew me in. I think be careful about answering the question directly when you're asked. And one of the points that people do is they pop an answer and then you can expound upon it with your ideology, but you always want to make sure you answer the judge's questions. And I agree. I felt a little bit like you were holding back just a bit, that there was a whole lot more knowledge there. And so this is your moment to shine. So do it. But I enjoyed hearing from you all today. It was wonderful.
I would just like to say thank you so much for letting us take up this portion of your day. We really appreciate you dedicating this moment to us and hearing what we have to say, and the very considerate but also constructive criticism is what I'm trying to say. We really appreciate it.
Well,
Thank
thank you for spending your afternoon with us, and good luck for the rest of today and tomorrow. And with that, you are absolutely free to go. Thank you.